They laughed when she walked down the dusty path in her mother's faded wrapper, her head bowed in shame, her hands trembling with the weight of a calabash filled with bitter cola and local gin. They whispered that she was cursed, just like the man she was being forced to marry. A man who slept under trees. A man with no name. A man whose silence haunted even the bravest hunters. The village had decided. Her family owed debts too heavy to carry, and the only way out was to give her away, to a stranger no one truly knew. No one told her that her wedding night would be spent in a mud hut surrounded by bush rats. No one told her she would wake up to the roar of engines, blinding headlights, and the sudden descent of a private jet into the middle of the village square. No one told her that her husband, the dirty, barefoot, broken man, was actually a billionaire prince in hiding. The sun rose lazily over the village of Ogata, casting its pale orange hue over the cracked walls of a once mighty mansion now swallowed by rust and ruin. Amara stood barefoot near the doorway, her eyes tracing the dusty path that led down to the village square. She was a sight to behold, tall, graceful, with skin that glowed like polished bronze and eyes deep as twilight. But her beauty, though admired in whispers and glances, had become more of a mockery than a gift. Villagers no longer bowed when they saw her. Instead, they smirked. They pointed. They laughed. Beauty meant nothing when her clothes were worn thin, when her stomach growled through the night, and when her hands were blistered from farm labor that never fed her enough. Once, her father, Ozoemona, was the pillar of Ogata. His name alone could open doors and silence conversations. His compound had echoed with the hum of generators, the laughter of servants, the clink of silver plates. He had cattle, lands, workers, and more than enough to spare. But all of that had vanished like smoke. His wife, Amara's mother, had fallen terribly ill. What began as faint spells and breathlessness grew into something unspeakable, something cruel. Hospital after hospital, treatment after treatment, they chased hope with money until there was none of either left. Ozoemona sold the lands, the cars, the cattle. He stripped himself of pride to hold on to the woman he loved. In the quiet of each morning, Amara could hear his tired footsteps pacing, could feel his sighs drift through the walls like whispers of regret. His eyes had sunk, his back had bent, and his voice had faded from thunder to a mere breeze. In this new life of nothingness, Amara and her two younger siblings became farmhands. They offered their hands to any farmer who would trade sweat for a bowl of gari or a leftover yam. Each day was a battle for one square meal, and sometimes not even that. People in the village didn't just mock her family, they avoided them. The same people who once shared drinks in their courtyard now turned away as if poverty were contagious. At the village stream, girls whispered loudly enough for Amara to hear. "Beauty without money is like perfume in a trash can," one had said, laughter echoing in the breeze. Amara kept her head high, but her heart cracked more with each word. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the mockery. It was watching her mother grow thinner each day, lying on a mat with hollow cheeks and eyes too tired to stay open. It was watching her father crumble from a man of influence to a man of shame. No matter how much she tried to help, fetching herbs, selling firewood, offering to clean compound floors, nothing made a dent in their misery. She had no one to run to, no rich aunt in the city, no magical solution. Just a heart full of dreams and hands full of dust. At night, Amara would sit on the same broken stool where her mother once braided her hair and stare at the stars. She imagined what her life could have been if fate had not turned its back on her. A life where she wore silk, not torn wrappers. A life where people knelt to greet her, not throw pity at her feet. The ache in her chest was deep. But even deeper was something else, something the world hadn't beaten out of her yet. Hope. Just a flicker of it, buried under the pain. And still, the walls whispered shame. The crickets chirped hunger. The wind carried snatches of gossip from neighboring compounds. Ozoemona's wealth was a lie. His daughter should marry a rich man and save them. Maybe it's better if the wife dies and ends this suffering. Amara didn't cry. She couldn't afford tears anymore. But her silence was a scream. A scream no one could hear. And still, fate was not done with her. It was only just beginning to sharpen its blade. The morning sun stretched its fingers across the mud walls of Ogata village, but there was no warmth in the air. Shadows clung to every corner, whispers hung heavy on every tongue. Word had spread like wildfire, Ozoemina's debts had become too much. Farmers, traders, even beggars claimed a piece of him now. There wasn't a single person in Ogata who hadn't lent him something. At first, it was done in kindness. But kindness has limits. And now, even the village king had run out of patience. The royal summons came unexpectedly. Ozoemina was brought to the palace square, where villagers gathered like storm clouds. His clothes were torn, his shoes mismatched, his eyes tired beyond years. The king looked down on him, not with anger, but with exhaustion. There were too many complaints, too many fights, too many days of waiting for a repayment that would never come. The king, once a friend of Ozoemina, now saw a burden. The judgment was swift and bitter. Since Ozoemina had no land, no cattle, no wealth left to offer, he must repay with what he had left, his eldest daughter. Amara. The words fell like a hammer on stone. She was to be married off to a man whose name no one knew, whose face was barely seen, and whose home was a mud and raffia hut at the edge of the forest. A man who lived like a ghost among men. Rumors said he was cursed. Some believed he was mad. But no one could say for sure, because no one dared to go near him. The announcement sent a chill through the village. People gasped, not because of pity, but because of spectacle. This was the kind of drama that fed their boring lives. A forced marriage to a man beneath the lowest. A beauty given away like a cow at a festival. The king declared it a sacrifice to restore peace and trust. It is better, he said, to lose a daughter than the dignity of an entire village. Amara didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply stood still, the world spinning around her like a whirlwind of shame. Her father could not look her in the eye. Her siblings wept quietly. Her mother lay on a mat at home, too weak to even speak. There was no choice. No protest. Just silence. In the days that followed, the villagers whispered louder. Some pitied her, others mocked. Even her beauty couldn't save her, they said. Who knows if that man even bathes? She'll return with madness before the year ends. No one dared say these things to her face, but they didn't need to. Their eyes said it all. Amara spent her last day in her father's home packing the few clothes she had into a nylon bag. Her heart was a storm of questions. Who was this man? Why had he never come forward himself? What kind of life awaited her in that leaking hut surrounded by snakes and silence? But she asked no one. She carried her fears like stones in her chest. That night, she sat beside her mother's mat, holding her frail hand. Her father stood outside, staring into the distance, perhaps wishing he could follow his wealth into the grave. Amara wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. He had sacrificed everything to save the woman he loved. And now, without saying it, he was sacrificing her too. The morning of the wedding came with gray skies. No music played. No drums beat. There was no dancing, no celebration, just footsteps and stares. The village square overflowed with people. Not to rejoice, but to witness what had never happened before. A wedding with no joy. A union made by debt. Children sat on rooftops. Women held babies to their chests. Even the elders, who rarely left their huts, came crawling out to see it for themselves. Amara wore the only dress that wasn't torn. Her hair was woven with dry thread. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply walked forward, barefoot, toward the altar of shame. The king stood between her and the man. A man whose face was barely visible beneath a wide hat. His wrapper was stained with soil. His feet cracked. He looked like the shadow of suffering. The king raised his staff and declared the union sealed. There was no blessing, no joy, just silence. And in that silence, Amara took the hand of a stranger and followed him away from everything she had ever known. Away from the village. Away from her name. Into the unknown. Into the forest. Into the hut of a man without a past. But what no one knew, what even Amara herself did not know, was that she was not walking into misery. She was walking into destiny. And destiny was already waiting. The forest was silent as they walked deeper into the unknown. Amara's feet sank into soft soil, and her bag weighed heavier than ever. The trees whispered secrets to the wind, and birds seemed to pause their songs. The man she now called husband said nothing. He walked ahead, slowly but steadily, as though every step was part of a hidden journey. His hut finally appeared, standing crooked and tired among the tall grass. Its roof of raffia leaves slouched like it wanted to fall. The door creaked, the inside smelled of earth and old firewood. That was her new home. There was no chair, no bed, no food, no sign of comfort. Amara stood in the corner, hugging herself, her beauty almost swallowed by the ugliness of her surroundings. She thought of her siblings, probably hungry. She thought of her mother, lying on a mat with no medicine. She thought of the village girls who had laughed behind her back. This was her reward for being born beautiful into the wrong kind of family. The man lay down on a mat and turned his back to her. Still, not a word. Not a glance. It was as though she didn't exist. But something strange happened the next morning. The air cracked, not with thunder, but with engines. Engines that roared like lions. The ground trembled. Amara jumped to her feet, peeking outside the hut. Her breath caught. Her knees weakened. A long convoy of black, sparkling exotic cars was crawling toward the hut, longer than any line of cars Ogata had ever seen. Soldiers in golden uniforms jumped out and lined up, saluting toward the hut she had just come out of in rags. The birds flew from the trees in fright. Dogs barked in panic. Children screamed and ran after the cars. From every corner of Ogata, villagers began to race through the bush paths. What they saw was beyond explanation. Soldiers bowed low. Trumpets blared. A golden staff was raised in the air. And then, before the villagers' eyes could catch up with their minds, the man they once called the Mad Bushman stepped forward, wearing a royal robe made of rare leopard fur and encrusted rubies. His muddy wrapper was gone. His face shone clean and youthful. His voice thundered with authority. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a madman. He wasn't a farmer. He was Prince Obina, heir to the Kingdom of Gold, the richest kingdom across the 10 rivers and 7 hills. The crowd froze. Mouths dropped. Women staggered. The same people who once called Amara cursed now held their heads and wailed in disbelief. Some dropped to their knees. Others hid their faces in shame. The king of Ogata arrived, confused, and demanded to know what was happening. Prince Obina turned and bowed slightly, a sign of royal grace. He explained that he had disguised himself for years, traveling from village to village, searching not for beauty, but for character. He wanted a wife whose love was pure, whose strength was forged through hardship, and whose soul was untouched by greed. And he found her. Amara, the girl mocked for her poverty, forced into marriage to pay off shame, was now standing at the center of destiny. He turned to her and lifted her hand. A golden crown was brought forward by one of the generals and placed on her head. She trembled like a flame in the wind. But her eyes, those tired, mocked, tear-washed eyes, now carried fire. The prince had chosen her. Not for beauty. Not for wealth. But because her silence held dignity. Her pain held patience. Her obedience held honor. The girl the village threw away was now its queen. The soldiers cleared the path. The prince and his queen stepped into the largest car in the convoy. Drums that had been silent all week suddenly began to beat. Not from the villagers, but from the palace band that came with the prince. Ogata village had never seen such glory. Some danced in shame. Others clapped in repentance. Many wept. But it didn't matter anymore. Amara didn't look back. She sat beside her husband, the man the world judged too early, and left behind the ashes of her mockery. She was now queen of the kingdom of gold. Morals and inspiration. Sometimes, life covers our destiny with the rags of suffering just to see who will walk through the storm without giving up. Amara's story teaches us that beauty is not always enough, but character, humility, and endurance will take you further than charm or riches ever will. She didn't complain. She didn't rebel. She didn't run. And that was her secret power. So next time life pushes you into a corner, remember, your hut could be a waiting palace. Your pain could be the path to your crown. What if your suffering is not a curse, but a disguise for your greatness? Do you believe pain can lead to glory? Would you have survived what Amara went through? What if your miracle is hidden in what you're trying to escape from? Like this story? Then like, comment, and subscribe to Candor Stories right now. Stay tuned. Stay inspired.